Welcome to the Crystal Zinn podcast. I believe our bodies are a living map of the entire universe. All the answers reside within. Remember, you are sovereign, whole, and infinitely valuable. And the best gift we can give to the world is our own healing. Join me as we explore holistic tools, spiritual practices, and paradigms that are shifting the way people experience life, business, and relationships. I love to share education on the most recent medical research and cutting-edge technology on anatomy, neurology, trauma, development, and more to give us a foundation in understanding how to align, utilize, and upregulate our physical systems. Ultimately, this podcast is a witness and support to people on their journey of remembering, an inspiration for all of us to keep going, and a reminder that we are not alone. Welcome to the Crystal Zinn podcast today. I'm glad you're here. Today I have a special guest, Charles, and he's a men's intimacy coach. So this is a big subject in the healing world right now, and I was really excited to talk about him, really excited about his research, his path, and the things that he's going to share with us today, because I had a lot of questions regarding this topic with men in my relationships, things that I think we can all relate to. So welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thanks for being here. How would you introduce yourself?
I use that term intimacy coach. A lot of people like to introduce me as a sex coach, which I guess that sounds sexier. But you know, to me, I feel like intimacy is really a little bit more all-encompassing term, and it's all very interrelated to me. So
I like that. So what we do on my podcast, we just tune in for us and our listeners at the beginning. So this may be the first time you've had a second for yourself today. So if you're in a place where it's safe to do so, go ahead and close your eyes. Join us in taking our first deep breath. And maybe even an audible exhale. And Thich Nhat Hanh says, always observe. There's actually no reason to change the breath. So as your next inhale comes, do less, allow more, and feel the texture around your heart space. As you exhale and release muscles, notice where that exits your body. And stay with us as we're just allowing for breath, maybe finding places in the body, the jaw, the shoulder, the fingers, feel a little restricted. Put your attention there, lean into it. Once again, no need to change anything, just more feeling, more awareness. And as you notice these sensations, to get back into the body, I'll borrow this series from one of my coaches. If that sensation had a voice, what would it say? Just listening to that, what comes up from the inside out. And then relaxing the shoulders, relaxing the body. Your next few exhales, put a little more intention into that letting go or releasing. Just that relaxing feeling as you exhale. One thing we do as yoga teachers when we show up, especially as Kundalini teachers, is we say, I'm not a person, I'm not a man, I'm not a woman, I'm a teacher. How can I be of service today? If you need more time, feel free to hit pause. Pop onto one of my free YouTube meditations. If you're ready to come back, do that with an inhale, fill up your body. Blink your eyes open. Okay, welcome back.
thank you.
Thank you.
I really loved the meditation when you brought into, how can I be of service? I got chills. So
That's
thank
beautiful.
you for that.
Well, I know from our previous conversation that is your heart's goal, So appreciate that from you. So you guys probably have some burning questions. And one or two of mine is something that Charles said to me on a call we had recently, when he alluded to the fact that sex is just a symptom, like, you know, the health in that area of your life with your partnership, whatever your situation is with yourself, is a symptom of intimacy and inner work and healing and things like that. And so his work focuses on all of these other, maybe seemingly unrelated areas to us at first glance. So wondering if you'd be willing to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, and you know, a question you'd ask me is, you know, what's the difference between sex and intimacy? And I had to think about how to answer that without spinning down a lot of different rabbit holes, because, you know, the English language is very diverse and messy and very sexy, and every word even evolves over time and has a different meaning to everybody. So I think about, you know, what intimacy means to me, but I also really like to geek out on sort of the way I see things perceived sort of in the culture as a whole. And I was thinking back to a definition of intimacy that I learned way back in the day. I went to this thing called impact training, you know, and they just said, into me you see. And that definition has always felt very aligned with me, right? It's the feeling of being seen and to see someone else. You know, and that's, you know, I think another phrase that's become sort of popular in the lexicon, right? We want to feel seen. Everybody wants to feel seen. And what that means takes on a lot of different meanings. So for me, I would say, for me personally, there isn't like a clear boundary between sex and intimacy, right? Sex is just an expression of physical intimacy, right? You're seeing me physically naked. You're also seeing into my, you know, deeper parts of me when I let myself be in a state of pleasure, when I let myself experience the surrender that comes with sex, right? Or even an orgasm, right? There's one moment in life where you lose all control, and that's when you cannot control an orgasm. If you do, you're not going to enjoy it, right? But when I look at how it's kind of discussed sort of in the lexicon, you know, especially if you kind of go back to sort of this later 90s, you know, like the more traditional sort of dynamics that men and women have on TV, right? And then that has kind of evolved. There's this sort of underlying theme that men want sex, women want intimacy, and men try to give intimacy in exchange for sex. And it's this transactional nature, this transactional view of human sexuality and intimacy and relationships that I find I just have a lot of antipathy to it. I find it very like disgusting. Like it makes me go, ugh, inside.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to serve each person either, because
No.
I've experienced that too. And my husband said, if I feel like you don't want this, but you're giving me this to get something else, then I now don't enjoy it. And I feel the same way. If you're taking me on a date or sharing something with me because you don't really want to, that's the means to the end, it destroys probably exactly what we're actually trying to achieve.
It does, and I love that you bring that up too. And I feel very much the same way. You know, I don't want something that is not given enthusiastically. You know, when I talk to people about consent, for instance, you know, I'll always use the term enthusiastic consent, right? I think the word consent is important, and we have to have discussions, unfortunately, in our society constantly about consent. But consent is not enough for me. I don't want something reluctantly given to me. I only want to experience physical sexual intimacy if it is coming from a place of two people fully wanting that with their whole body. And you know, one thing I've learned, you know, been divorced for a while now. I got divorced when I was, you know, in my early 30s, so it's been about 10 years now. And in that time, I've watched dating culture. I've watched the rise of the sexfluencers. I've watched things shift so much. But one thing I've learned is that women definitely do want to have sex. In fact, you know, especially, you know, I think in their 30s. And, being in Utah, a lot of the women that I've dated are, they're divorcees that came from the Mormon church. So they got married very young, had a decade or more of unfulfilling sexual intimacy, and now they're trying to make up for lost time.
So that stereotype is wrong.
It is very wrong.
So is the stereotype wrong for the men as well, that they just don't want intimacy?
Absolutely. I know, and I'm very much I have a very balanced sort of masculine feminine energy. So personally for me, like, I relate a lot to the stereotype. Like, my body will not physically react, like at this point in my life, will not physically engage without intimacy. Intimacy is what turns me on. But, as I work with men and I talk to men and I listen to men, like, there is underneath that same sense, right? Men want intimacy, men want to connect. But, we're kind of, especially when we're younger, sort of playing out the script that we're told. And men are told that you want sex. This is what you do. You go and you get laid. Right? Even the idea, you get laid, you get lucky, as if like you won an accomplishment. You put notches on your bedpost. I mean, our language just sort of, it just sort of reveals so much about what we have actually like believed in our subconscious, right? And the really kind of worst part about it to me is that men and women have been judged by their sexual partners, but inversely. For every kind of, there's a lot of talk about how women are tired of being judged for having sexual partners, or these freaking Mormon church analogy about bubblegum makes me want to punch the wall.
Oh, I know that one.
Oh my God. This analogy that like as a woman, you're like a stick of bubblegum, and every time you lay with a partner, you're like chewed up. Is so
you can never go back.
So wrong on so many levels. But
thank you for saying that.
But the other side of that, is if you're a man, you are judged by the amount of sexual partners you have. Maybe not by women, maybe not as much, maybe not as overtly, but when men talk to other men about sex, and this is finally starting to change, but for the 99% of interactions that men have with other men about sex, it's a bravado and scorekeeping, right? It's like how many, we talk about, how big we are, how long we lasted, and how many partners we've had. We are actually, our social status increases with the number of notches on the bedpost. And one thing I've become really, really fascinated by, and I know we had kind of talked about this, is sort of the way that this is socialized younger. And I had the opportunity to watch the movie Superbad with my teenage son and his 3 virgin friends that were all 16. And that was I could have wrote a paper about that experience. It was really cool because we got to talk about it afterward. But like that whole show is about these seniors in high school desperately trying to get alcohol so that they can get laid because they're terrified of going to college as virgins.
It's the whole quest.
Literally.
It's like their purpose.
They're self-sacrificing on so many levels, and you can hear that they relieve it. They're not talking about, oh, it's going to be so good. I can't wait to experience this. I can't wait to make love to this woman. It's, we cannot go to college as virgins. That is social death as a man, right? And the movie American Pie is such a classic sort of example of that too. And so I like to talk about that because and bring awareness to that, because I think it's a lot more under the surface and there's a lot less conversations about it. But it puts men in a box too. And so now men, when they're younger and before they start to learn these things, are pursuing sexual conquest for the sake. And again, there's pleasure in it and we like it and we want it, but the base motivation is acceptance, is feeling like that's where I derive my value from.
Wow, that is powerful. Because that leads me to kind of one of the main questions. Do you read or listen to Esther Perel?
I think so.
She is kind of like the leading relationship intimacy coach right now in the United States and a little beyond. But she says what you said, and she says men, exaggerate the body count, and that's how they get, by exaggerating the body count, that's how they get value. And women get it inversely by diminishing the body count. And just think about that message that sends. And she also says, tell me like your fantasies, like Like, what's the storyline? What's going on? What do you desire in those relationships? And I'll tell you what your deepest, innermost childhood, like, wounds, happiness, desires are. And so men and women alike. So she is also doing all this research and saying that, yeah, these stereotypes are so off and it's so much more nuanced, like you said. And whether men know it or not, even if they're unconscious of it, they've been taught that rhetoric or just inundated, and indoctrinated with it, we have to recognize, even if they can't, that there is some of that nuance of a human being seeking for a desire, and what is it that you're trying to fulfill. For some people, it's purpose. For some people, it's safety. For some people, it's value, right? It's just as individual as each of our childhood wounds. And so I think that big question that I really also want to hear about is this paradigm of the man and the men's work that you do and things like that. And so maybe it would be helpful to tell your history, and that can kind of illuminate for us like these deeper questions I want to know about the man's experience.
Yeah, and I just want to reflect, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because it can be difficult to talk about this as men. There is often not a lot of grace in discussions about men. There's a lot of, we're tired of hearing about men. Men have had it easy for so long. And, one of the things that I really am passionate about is sort of bringing awareness to the fact that men, we are also in the prison of patriarchy. We may have a much nicer cell, but we're still trapped within its walls and forced to play out these patterns of behavior within it. And the goal should be to unite as men and women and break out of prison, not fight over commissary scraps.
Have you been looking for the adventure of a lifetime? Join me, Elizabeth, and Rachel this June in stunning Sardinia, Italy for a yoga and adventure retreat. My heart has been calling me to this part of the world for a really long time. Connect with your mind, body, and spirit while exploring breathtaking landscapes, rock climbing, boating trips, and more. Early bird pricing is available until January 31st, 2025. Email me, visit my website, or check out my Instagram at Crystals and Yoga for more details. Let's make magic together in Sardinia.
Which is especially, let's get into the story of my youth. That's very much the nature of addiction, right?
Yeah. So tell me more about that.
So that's a pretty easy place to start my story, because it's my experience with addiction and alcoholism. And I just use the term addiction because it's very much, alcohol addiction. Started very young. I grew up my earliest memories are of living in an alcoholic household. My parents were divorced when I was very young. My dad was a raging alcoholic, and I mean that is a double entendre. He was a very serious alcoholic, and he also had serious issues with rage. And my mom used to say, half jokingly, like, I had to move to California or he was going to kill me. He had that sort of thing about him. He would get mad, and it was terrifying. And, I was a young boy, but he was a dominant force of a man. I mean, he was big physically, he was tall, he, did the whole thing, lifted weights, probably a little enhancement on the side. And he was a lawyer, and a businessman. So he had that personality that walked into a room and knocked everybody over. And he would get so mad. I remember when I was 5, and I had these vitamins that he would give me every morning. And one morning I forgot to take them. I thought I'd taken them. He's like, "Did you take them?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I remember coming home that night, and he's very much intoxicated, packing my stuff up, because he says, "I'm disowning you. You're a bleeping liar." And I'm 5 at the time. So that was just sort of the environment I grew up in. And then when I was 8, he reached a point where he didn't have the resources that I have today. And he took his own life. And my mom, who had gotten sober, actually came back and was not able to really process that grief in a healthy way, and she went back into drugs. So then immediately that was brought back into my life. And so when I was 10 years old, and my cousin, who was my only friend, offered me he's like, do you want to hit this? All the DARE programming went out the window, and I said yes, and had my first drink when I was 40 as well, a 40 ounce from the liquor store, which you can imagine what that did to a 10-year-old. But for me, it was just like an instant sort of addiction, because I had so much pain, so much trauma. This was the only relief I'd ever known. And so that just became my adolescence. From that moment on, it was go time. It was only the only thing that limited how often and what I did was what I could get. And 13, I tried methamphetamine for the first time, LSD, acid. I actually didn't smoke crack till I was 18, and I just did it all, and it's all I did. And so I reached a bottom at the age of 20 and ended up in rehab and ended up getting sober in a 12-step program. And, I pretty much had, I think it's like 6 months in that I finally, from going to rehab, that I finally stopped. But I spent the first 15 years of my life sober, in recovery, very active, and I needed remedial education. When you were in junior high, I wasn't going to dances. I was hanging out in meth houses,
Yeah.
So I needed a lot of remedial education on just emotional adulthood, and I found that there. And really, really beautiful experience with the 12 steps. I still find that the majority of my own principles that are kind of core beliefs of mine, and the way that I handle things, humility, the men's process, concepts of faith, come from that foundation. But when it no longer worked for me and was aligned for me to stay in a 12-step program, I kind of was off. It was like another sort of off into the void. This was about 4.5 years ago, and I had a lot of missing. I lost my community. Like almost everybody that I knew was like that I knew from 12 steps. And it was a dark journey for me. I think that's the hardest part about making big changes in our life, whether it be a divorce, whether it be leaving the church, whatever it is that we have to sort of step into the void without knowing what we're going to find. We have to kind of walk off the path, and in that period of time before we start to find our way again is so terrifying and difficult. But eventually I started to find my way into other spiritual groups. I discovered a lot of that, like a lot of the next healing phases of my life were in plant medicine journeys, and I started to build community and started to fill in some of those things that were missing. But the one thing that was still missing was deep one-on-one work with another man. And that was something that was the most beautiful and rewarding part of long-term sobriety in the 12 steps. Was sponsoring someone else, like sitting down with another man and holding them through the process of trying to come from hell and come out, and you have this, having been to hell and found my way out, I had a unique ability to help an alcoholic or a drug addict that someone who hasn't couldn't. No therapist, no judge, no teacher, no concerned parent, right? Like there's something that only somebody with experience can help us with. And you want to talk about intimacy, right? That's also a form of intimacy, right? Like it's not sexual romantic intimacy, but it's truly like seeing someone at a deep level. And part of that process would be like being vulnerable, being authentic, letting them see me, sharing my story, permissioning them to then share their story and start to release the deep, dark secrets. And the unfortunate reality is most people that try to get sober don't. So it's heartbreaking at times. I went to a lot of funerals in my life, but I also got to see people who had given up on themselves, who had society has sort of thrown away as broken, come alive, start to own and take accountability for their lives, start to heal, start to process, start to make amends for the harms they've done, and change in a fundamental way the way they live, and become beautiful, happy human beings. And missed that a lot. And so I thought, like, what's another thing that I have had as much struggle with as drugs and alcohol, and that's sex and intimacy, right? So I decided to sort of take sort of the gifts that I had at, I always have had this sense of me, like people always tell me, like, you just make me feel more comfortable being me, and opening up, when I would share meetings, like even on dates, like if I had $1 for every time on a first date somebody said, I never really get this, I never say all this stuff usually, or I never open up this much, then I would have a lot of dollars. So I wanted to take that into something that, I could take into my new life. And so I went and took this course with this man named Cam Fraser. He was somebody that it took a long time before I sort of decided where to go, but he was somebody that I just felt had really great integrity, really non-dogmatic, had a really just approach that aligned with my values. And so I spent the year 2022 taking this course, Sacred Sexuality Coaching for Men. And that's sort of been the journey that I've been on. And, I've had to use that trick of focusing on service, focusing on who I can help a lot, because by day, I'm a quality engineer in a medical device company. There's a lot of imposter syndrome that comes up for me as I step into this work. And the only thing that really kind of reminds me, like pulls me out of it, is like remembering that, like, there's so much men in the world that need this, and they can't afford for me to get stuck in my own ego, stuck in my own imposter syndrome. I just have to set that aside and do it anyway. And so that's kind of where I'm at today, and it's really exciting. As I've started to really get more into the work, and I just love, like, it's very rewarding to touch people's lives and get to see it directly impact them. And I feel that, I feel really strongly that everybody has a role to play in creating a new world. And when I'm doing this work, whether it be talking on a podcast, doing like a men's group or one-on-one work, or just literally talking to someone, I had that feeling, I get like this alignment of purpose. Like this is what I'm meant to do in my role of making the world a better place. Because, I think healing can be, that phrase, like hurt people. Healing can be very contagious. Heal people. And so, and it just gives me chills sometimes to think and talk about it, when, like this is how we make a new world. And the world right now can be very overwhelming. But we all like have a part to play in it. And if we all do the things that like align with our heart and our purpose and our gifts, then I very much believe we can create one organically. It's not going to be from somebody, from some leader or some company or some whatever. It's going to be this ground up sort of revolution of healing. And this just feels like, I know this is my part to play in it.
Wow, that's so beautiful. There's so many pieces in there. So first off, thank you for sharing that so authentically and passionately. And it, like you said, the cadence of it and the authenticity and the story is just so beautiful to just sit back and kind of absorb as you're telling it and watch how your path weaved. And it sounds like that, this story of origin for you, you were not given any leg ups, like any handouts, right? Come inherent with these spiritual gifts and this inner knowing, and everything was set up to not support that. I don't want to say destroy it, but just put you in the most difficult position. And I think I said this to you earlier, because I work in the addiction recovery world as well, that it's incredible that you're against the statistics, that you're here sitting here today telling us this story. Overall thing that I feel when I listen to you talk is just the message of hope, like this story that everyone wants to believe, but sometimes just can't seem to grasp onto it, especially when they have circumstances like that and are in a dark place and there's nothing that can convince them, or like light at the end of the tunnel, that they could actually get to a place where there is hope. And so it just seems really important and purposeful that your story starts like that. And it's so like intense what you're saying, and you can just feel the depth in it because you actually lived that, you know, and then hit rock bottom and then built it from the ground up. It's also really inspiring and really hopeful. And it sounds like you were able to get the things that you needed, the right people and the right place and the right time and the right, you know, finding of inner strength, you know, to keep moving forward on the path. It's not easy. No. And there's a lot of darkness and there's a lot of loneliness, which once again, seems like it's serving your passion and your offering in the world today because you're seeing those holes where there wasn't anything for you. And I hear you saying you're trying to fill it, and that's where you feel the most purpose and the most aligned is when you're reaching back down and going like, I know what's needed here, right? And you have a very unique perspective, an authentic perspective on those places. One thing I really grasped onto was that male intimacy, you know, having that with another man, a mentor, a loving father-man relationship in your life, whether that be spiritual or literal or brother or father or son. That paradigm was lost to us. But even in the Eastern practices I study, it's always a guru and an understudy, right? It's always like the prince being mentored by the king and a whole slew of male mentors. Like something about this breakdown in the patriarchy that, you know, leaves men alone seems to be the biggest offense and violation to the male spirit, right? And then being told you don't need that and you shouldn't need that, when actually that sort of friendship and mentorship, that kind of intimacy is second only to your self-intimacy. But if no one taught you how to do that, then that's your primary learning mode of co-regulation and learning intimacy with another person who sees you, knows you as close as humanly possible. Seeing someone like you're talking about, that mentor saw you, and then you're able to see other people, and then walking them through those steps to witness themselves. And that's a practice that's been lost to us for everybody. And it's important and it's powerful, and it's especially potent in men. And the part that just feels like I just want to open it up, and it like kind of breaks my heart, like new places in my heart open for compassion, just like being in your understanding and your energetic field for the compassion of it. I feel that, and I'm learning a lot just from listening to you. We both are raising sons, right? Mm-hmm. So when we do inner child work, or always go, that's just such an easy way for our brain and our heart to wrap our mind around the innocence of it. And I'm sure you've done a ton of inner child work to be sitting here today, especially with what you went through. So if we're viewing the male paradigm as needing this example and intimacy from men, how do we reconcile that in a world like today? And the one thing I've noticed with men and male clients in my experiences, the aversion to that, exactly what they need, carves in a wound so deep that it's the one thing they can't approach safely. So how do you get around that?
Have you been looking for the adventure of a lifetime? Join me, Elizabeth, and Rachel this June in stunning Sardinia, Italy for a yoga and adventure retreat. My heart has been calling me to this part of the world for a really long time. Connect with your mind, body, and spirit while exploring breathtaking landscapes, rock climbing, boating trips, and more. Early bird pricing is available until January 31st, 2025. Email me, visit my website, or check out my Instagram at Crystals in Yoga for more details. Let's make magic together in Sardinia.
I really appreciate, you have an ability to see that, and I think it's really, first of all, I think it's really important for women to talk about that, because as a man, and I talk about having empathy and compassion for men who are lonely, it's you got to turn the comments off immediately. There's so much anger and rage and backlash, and it's directed at shame, and shame doesn't fix anything. Shame doesn't make anything better. When we experience shame and guilt are literally the lowest vibration emotions, and all that the human mind does when it experiences shame and guilt is anything to get rid of that feeling. And very rarely does that become a better person, you know? And I just want to go back to what you said at the beginning, like hope is what we need. And, you know, it was really cool kind of talking to you, and you have some perspective on 12-step recovery, because, you know, I just kind of want to share my analogy, right? Like the first step, right, is there's a problem. Came to believe that we were powerless over whatever it was, however it's phrased. Like the first step is we have a problem. And the second step is there's a solution, that there's hope. And too often lately in the world, we don't get past the first step, whatever it is, you know. It's people are so lost in how horrible so many things seem that they try to have a conversation with them about how to actually make it better, and they're just lost, you know. And I think from an individual perspective, that's where I can be so powerfully helpful, just being, right? Because as you said, like, you wouldn't think that was my history when you first meet me. I don't seem like a drug addict. And yet when I tell the story of my life, anybody who's experiencing addiction will know, oh my God, this guy knows, this guy gets it. And that's where that hope comes in. Because I used to, when I was in, or especially when I was early in recovery, like I would say, like, getting sober was impossible. Like, somebody be like, you need to get sober. It's like, might as well tell me I need to join the NBA. I'm more likely to dunk a basketball, you know, over Michael Jordan than to live a life without drugs and alcohol, because all that I knew of sobriety was pain, was misery. And it's like you said, like, that's the only moments of relief that I would experience. And so to believe, to find real hope to somebody who is hopeless, it has to be more than you can exist without this. You can find joy and peace and love. You are not broken, you know. There's a sense of brokenness in a lot of people. Like, trauma does that to us, right? We go into normal situations, we find ourselves unable to feel at ease, to feel happy and joyous in social situations where other people are. I think I'm broken. I'm just broken. And that feeling of brokenness and hopelessness, that's the enemy we're fighting. It's not each other. It's that feeling of like despair. And to really grow and shift and change, whether it be from, you know, men right now who don't, you know, if they haven't had father figures. You know, I literally grew up without a father. And so I'm now trying to learn to be a father. I had no example of it.
And less than no example, and a really bad abusive example
yeah.
of it.
And, you know, finding compassion for my father. You know, I was in this men's group that I'm currently in. It's this beautiful container that it's like a 6-month container with this group, the Energy Stack. I really like it. And I think when we, you know, after, you know, I'm hopeful that I think we're going to expand it. I'd like to step into some leadership roles there, and maybe create some of my own, but I think they're really powerful to find ones with integrity and true humility. There are a lot of, they're not all good. I don't think they're all serving a purpose, but, you know, in that container, I shared the story. Like, I shared a very graphic story of my father's suicide. Mm-hmm. One that I had actually wrote when I was 18, published in my high school literary magazine, and then literally been unable to read for 20 years. And I shared it in this container, and I had this feeling come over me, like, if this group that I was in at the time had been around in 1993, my father would be alive, you know. And this just overwhelming feeling of gratitude and forgiveness, and wanting him to experience that forgiveness, you know. And I think that's where, you know, like you said, we, you know, my perception of sort of society is that we as the millennials, and I'm an elder millennial. Yeah. That's our technical term now.
That's where I'm at.
My generation name has changed so many times. I was born at Gen X and as a millennial, now I'm an elder millennial. I kind of like that. Yeah. We broke the old system, whether it was because of what we did, social media, the internet, technology, whatever. It doesn't matter who or how. Like, the old structure, we broke it. There's many parts of the world trying to hold on to it, but as a whole, you can feel like traditional relationship dynamics, traditional masculine, feminine dynamics do not rule the the society and sort of the general culture, but we didn't fill it with anything, and again, it's like enough to put on one generation to break the old system, right? But filling it with something, creating something better in its place is harder and is more important. And we kind of right now have this sort of cultural leadership vacuum, and I've been reminded a lot of the book of Tale of Two Cities, right? The French Revolution. They toppled the evil, brutal French monarchy, and the same people that led that revolution created something even worse.
Much worse.
Worse.
I was going to say, it's interesting you're speaking to that paradigm, because I think it's very relevant to men and what we've traditionally known as leadership, and that whole conversation surrounding women versus men, divine masculine versus feminine, and how to lead again. Because you're right, we're in the throes of the destruction, the shadow work, the Shiva, the overturning in the earth's soil. And how do you transmute that pain and that shift into creation and life again? And it's the people who can see that, and spin upward are going to be the new leaders. And there actually are a lot of them, right? And we're becoming them, and it's so beautiful. I have a question from your perspective and just your education thus far. What, in your opinion, is a woman's role in this, and how can a woman be helpful and supportive and or really destructive? What's that dance between the woman and the man surrounding these topics? Because that is a very big part of the wounding. A lot of men I've worked with have sustained just as much abuse, but from their mother. And so there's these skewed concepts as well. And of course you do. If you have a father like that, you have a mother that cannot exemplify any sort of, healthy, interaction between male and women either. So we are, like you said, in our generation, in this big open question, this big quantum field of what do we want to create, especially when we don't have patterns. Where do we look to? And more importantly, than looking to the past or research, I think, is what's intrinsically coming out from the inside. Like, what are our channeled revelations? What's your personal experience? So that's my question, is where do you see women playing a role in this right now?
That's a good question. And, speaking to you, you clearly have sort of a sense of empathy, and you have a voice, right? And I think that there's a lot of feminine rage. And obviously, right? It's been a long time coming. So it's tough for me as a man, because I see this feminine rage. I see these women on Facebook, on Instagram. Nobody uses Facebook anymore, but on Instagram, on TikTok, writing articles, influencers. So much of it's just channeled into men need to sit down and shut up. And I get where that's coming from. Men have dominated, have kept down women collectively for most of human history. And there's, but I kind of look at it from my role in my day job, right? What I do, risk analysis, root cause analysis, right? And if we have to move past vengeance, we have to move past settling the score, and we have to say, what world do we want to create together? And I think that I have been eviscerated viciously on social media, any kind of, if I were to go in a post and make a comment saying, yeah, I think we do need to have empathy for men, the things that come to me are terrible. And I think as women, kind of being able to maybe sort of help guide that conversation back to okay, your rage is justified, but what do you want to do with it? Do you want to punish men as a whole? Do you want to get even? Do you want to create a better world for everybody? And to really try to see that this system where we have had an advantage power dynamic is still one where we're locked into. Men are now, recording this episode of this podcast that I'm building with my partner today, with my Cam Fraser, the one who ran that course. And one of the things he talks about a lot is the man box. And we've like taken the man box, broken it apart, and then wrapped it in ayahuasca or something. Like there's this new conscious man box, but it's still the same thing. Like this is how, instead of like you go to work and you earn the bills and you come home, it's like you become a Kundalini sex warrior.
It's actually, I'm actually really glad you brought that up. Sorry, because I had a giggle about it, because we talked about this, just trading one paradigm for another, and in the woman paradigm and in the man paradigm, right? Like whatever is the man box or the woman box, we need to be really careful that we're not just trading one disempowerment for another. And men have to be really careful that they're not just, trading one patriarchy box for another. And it was interesting as you're talking about your transition versus your purpose versus your where are you of service and what does that mean for your day job. One thing I've seen in a lot of men that I've coached, right? And there's benefits, I think, in both containers. That's why I wanted to ask you. I had somebody stop me a couple years ago when I would only do women clients and women retreats. And he said, look, I get that you are creating these boundaries and you're healing yourself, but one day you are going to be in a place where you can help men. And I just want to tell you this, that most of my change has come about being a better man and, participating in all these things with my wife and my kids. Most of those aha moments and like sincere coaching and really important healing moments for me have come from women. And I was like, thank you for sharing that with me. I was trying to receive it. I just kind of stowed it away to try to lean into it more in a time where I felt safer to do that. And I've moved in that direction, but I thought that was powerful and interesting. And so as I've been stepping into that, one theme that keeps coming up, and I've noticed a lot, is when you are flailing, when you're in that dark place where you've kind of, had some hope, set down some of the old things, enter the space of like complete breakdown, which is scary because you're out there, you're in pieces, you don't have the old egos, the old ways to make meaning of life. It's really easy when you're vulnerable and open in those spaces to just grasp onto that new, I like how you called it a box. I call it just like a new ego or identity or purpose, and say, well, I'll take this cube and fit it back in this slot and it's better, right? It's an upgrade. Yeah. I'm just going to get the new version of the Xbox. And so I'm doing great. And you're just saying, like, I'm trying to get you off the console completely, right? And I've seen a lot of men in their day jobs not know how to integrate. And I've, said a lot of times, felt like, it's not about what you do, it's about who you're being. And so if you, like you said earlier, if you're embodying that, like I'm speaking a lot to like who you are, and like you said, the energy and people just being around you saying, I feel this. I inherently maybe can't follow a step program or don't know how to make sense of hope, but when I'm around you, something opens in me and I feel access to that hope that I never had. Well, why would you not work in corporate America or not follow the omens or take a job or support your family? Like the roles and the avatars we're in, right? And the places where we walk, it doesn't matter as much as we think it matters. And why would you remove yourself from those situations and go be a Kundalini instructor on the beaches of Hawaii? And, I think that would, in a way, effectively be losing the war because you've now gone and removed yourself as the light in all these situations. And we do need to take care of ourselves and find our alignment and seek that. But when I see a lot of men doing exactly that, they found something, and so they completely remove themselves from where they could be of service to just, be in a place that is more conducive, easy. And I actually have a really great therapist. I love what she says, where she says, we're talking about, and this is like, we're the elder millennials, but this is coming up in the next generations, which is mental fortitude, resilience, emotional intelligence, and strength. We can easily mistake all of that for just curating a safe environment, which actually creates more weakness. And so a lot of times holding boundaries or saying, I won't participate in these things, it's kind of like the toxic positivity, right? Like good vibes only. And like,
miss me with that.
there may be a time period where you need to protect yourself to heal, because we need to feel safe, and that's why we're in rehabs and we have our mentors. Like, we really have to be in a safe place for our nervous system for extended period of time. And once we're done overturning that, right, and healing and licking the wounds and coming back out, if you create your entire life and environment to be stress-free and to be not in opposition to any of your beliefs, then, you know, she says what we've actually done is the opposite. Like, we're not creating resiliency, we're not spreading the light, we're not being of service if we can't re-enter the world and be a light and lift people up and create a new world. We're actually just creating a little box or cave that we can protect ourselves in, you know, and then building up the bricks and being like, so I don't know, it's a hard thing to do. And I've been there myself too, right? The pendulum swings, where I was just telling you this morning, I am like, I cannot, my boundary of distance has to be so far because I can't contain myself right now. I don't have these skills, and that's valid. And the goal, I think, should be resilience, fortitude, service. You know, why are we strengthening this light if we can't do that? And so I don't know what that means for each man individually. We keep talking about how nuanced everyone's intimacy, purpose, deep inner childhood wounds are. And it's just as nuanced for a man as it is for anybody else. So once we figure that out, I think those are the keys, but the goal would be to strengthen, right, and share the light. Yeah.
It's really interesting as we talked about language, and I've noticed the way things float through the sphere. I'm seeing posts that are this backlash to safety. There's no such thing as a safe space, or there's an obsessiveness now with safetyism, and I think you speak to that. But again, it's where language fails, right? Like, it's like it's so funny to me where I'll see somebody post something, I'm like, I don't agree with exactly what you said there, but I guarantee you that if we talk for an hour, our hearts are aligned.
Yeah.
What I think that we need to create is truly safe places. But let me explain why. And this is why this is the podcast that we're creating, right?
Yeah.
Safe to Love is we want to explore what it takes to be safe, to feel safe, and that's also where intimacy comes in, right? Like, what is intimacy, right? It's taking the armor off, taking the armor off, and the deeper intimacy is just taking layers and layers of the armor, the walls that we built up to protect ourselves from all the times we've been hurt, and to go out into this world. But we can't be there all the time, right? And we're not wired that way, right? Like, my ancestors, when they were running along the Serengeti or plains, or what, you know, I'm not the most familiar exactly with geography, but you know, if you believe that humanity originated on the plains of Africa, like prehistory, pre-civilization, but they would encounter a lion, and they would go into an activated fight or flight mode, right? Like, that part of our body, adrenaline, the crocodile brain, all of that stuff, the sympathetic nervous system, right? It would take over, and it would say, that lion is all that matters to you right now. Love, food, sex, bathroom breaks, water, everything gone. All that exists in this world right now is that lion getting away from it. And then our ancestors would either get away from it, or they would not. And if they didn't, then they wouldn't propagate their genes. And if they did, they would eventually go to a place where there were not lions, find a safe, relatively safe place, whether with themselves or their tribe, family, depending on what we're talking about, and then center. We exist in a perpetual state of being chased by a lion. Every single thing, every single danger, every single risk, bills, the news, our partner's mood, every single thing that we encounter through our day. And then even if we're alone in a room, we got this great brain that can just remind us of all the dangers, locks people into a perpetual state of survival mode. And I know I'm not the first person to explain that, but I think people don't sometimes stop and think what that is. We were not built that way. This is a temporary state designed to hyper-focus us on one thing, right? Which is why when your partner or something's bothering you, why can't I stop thinking about that?
Yeah.
You literally are wired to not think about anything else. And then it also stresses our body. And so in order to have so when I talk about having safe places, having safe relationships, I too am in a place of kind of having to try to create a little bit more of a cocoon right now. The last year had a lot of dark, difficult things in it, right? But the purpose is to rest, to recuperate, let my body return to center, to feel safe. And that's what we want to create in relationship, right? Because, we've all experienced deep intimacy when we were young. And most of us got hurt. And it's like, okay, well, I opened myself up and let you see me to someone that wasn't safe. And I'm gonna shut that right back down, right? So that's why the kind of the idea of this podcast came about, because it's like, it's not enough to just teach people, open up, be more intimate. It's how do I become more safe to be intimate with? And all of us have work to do there. Every single person has work to do there. But that's what these men's spaces are. And so the warrior archetype, I'm not saying that's bad. That's why I think these new man boxes, these new dogmas have become, because there's so much in them. Like, I want to feel powerful. I want to feel like I can take care of my family, myself. I want to feel confidence to go and talk to a woman, and that I can show up in a way that will be pleasing to her, right? All these things that we're being taught, like they're very attractive. It's just putting the box back around them. Yeah. That's the problem. And right now, like all these men's retreats and groups, they're all like King's Council, Warriors Den. And I'm putting together, it's still kind of in the early phases, but I want to do a retreat called the Gentleman. Because in order to be a warrior, I need to be a place where I'm not just, like, that is not the entirety of my being. I need a place where I can be weak, afraid, fall apart, want gentleness, need to be just be able to take that mask off, right? And we as men don't have that opportunity as much publicly, because any show of weakness in the world, we're just going to be, either we're going to be judged as now we're not manly enough, and a lot of that judgment is coming from women.
And you're going to experience real consequences
and real
that
consequences.
affect your life, actually.
Yep.
So that's why the box is so enticing. I just have to say, that was so beautifully said. And I like that you brought in that analogy of like cycles. It reminds me of when I'm teaching, a new practitioner. I run a lot of trainings, right? And when they always want to know what's right, like, is now the time to rest? Is now the time to be the warrior? Where do I find these things? The answer is always, it depends. It depends, because it has to be intentional and influenced and attuned to you. You have to understand your cycles. And I think that's another huge injustice and language barrier for women, even now recently, being more okay to talk about our flow and cycles and going with the moon and, the winter and the seasons. It's not even approached the men's space for men to be okay to flow or cycle,
no, men don't cycle.
Or respect those. Yes.
You know how many times I've seen that literally said, men don't have a cycle. They have a 24-hour cycle.
Well, I've lived with men in different capacities my whole life, and I would say
cycle.
They absolutely
we
do.
cycle. Okay.
We absolutely do.
I certainly do.
And so I just love that concept of, we cannot put a pin in a space and time and say that is the answer for everything. But what's so beautiful and cool about what you're saying is there is a necessity and a portion of the healing process. And I want to fill that need and be really clear about that. It's filling this need, but it's not all there is. We're not coming together and being warriors all the time. Also, we're not coming to your retreat going, oh, we have to be the gentleman all the time, because what's that going to mean for my career? Is that a box I have to take on? And that was kind of my point with the men that I've been in contact with, which is, it sounds like what you're saying is we're moving towards and learning this process and circling back to over and over again where our true safety comes from, which is inside us all, self-trust. That goes everywhere with us. And the trust that will shift when things need to be shifted.
the trust that we'll be the gentleman when we need to, the trust in ourselves that we can assert boundaries and control and protection when we need to, that just that self-trust to cycle and show up how and when we need to, and when we don't, we know how to recover from that, right? And we know where to go and what to do. And so that idea of building deep self-trust is where our true safety comes from. And that's the ultimate goal, not taking on another box. And so for a lot of men, maybe that means still being an engineer, showing up in that way, here and here and here. Have you ever heard Vinnie Tolman's near-death experience?
Mm-mm.
One of the things he came back with from the other side, and he wrote a book. I really like his. I really like ND's, but I really enjoy his because of the messages, how well they resonate with me. And one he came back with was the most important message for him personally was, be the same person everywhere, which I think is even more difficult for men in a society like this than women, because we can really curate our experiences, and even though it may be a negative connotation, we're really allowed a lot of personality variance. Even if it's negative, like that's expected from you, right? But not from men. And so to be the same person everywhere and to adopt what you're saying, this wholeness of reclaiming every part of you, every part of the man, the gentle, the warrior, the king, the son, the father, to hold all of those counselors, at the round table at the same time, and then take all of those into everything you do and be safe in that would be incredible.
Well, sometimes one part protects the other.
Totally, right? Yeah. I'm a big proponent of parts work.
Me too.
So
I've got a lot of work.
You gotta understand that. One of my shaman explained it like this. She's like, okay, so you have all these old men sitting around your table, right? Responsible for all these things. And parks work is brilliant for like the teenager, the child, all this. But ultimately, like the higher paradigm is you have this council of elders. And that's, your higher council. and on days where they're not aligned, this guy's like facing outward in his chair. This guy's pulling the other guy's beard. They're just basically the idea that they're in conflict. And in parts work, it could be more nuanced and it could have more stories around it, saying like, my 18-year-old self is protecting my 5-year-old self. And we get into that depth, and I love that too. But I love her simple paradigm of just saying, here's a really simple way to bring everybody back in the moment. It's a shamanic practice where you stare in the center of the medicine wheel. But you only give 4 of them in your metaphor. So there's 4 old men, north, south, east, and west. And you go to the first one and you use the ideas of, let's do east, because that's traditional. And so you say, this is about the mind. And you say, you are welcome here. And you picture him turning back around at the table and you say, how is my mind today? Give me one word to describe it. A word you describe the air: cloudy, clear, tumultuous, and one number from 0 to 10, 7. And he turns his chair back into the table and he's welcome here. And then you go, around. I can give someone, I should record a little YouTube on this. That'd be helpful. But you kind of go through each one and they each have their theme: mind, spirit, emotions, body. And the idea is, once you've witnessed them all and you're welcome here, you stare in the middle of the medicine wall, and now you're all making decisions together. You're a collaboration. So if you're in your engineering job and you need to show up as the leader, you need to make a decision, you need to fire someone, fine. If you need to show up gently with your son, but the idea is that one isn't acting in aversion to any of the others. We've all agreed. This is the dance. This is the role I'm bringing forth right now. That was really helpful to me too, as like a mother and a woman and an entrepreneur and a wife, and and all my complex trauma stuff was, these are roles. And that's a very shamanic way to look at it. If you've been in a plant medicine, I am this beyond my roles, and I can reclaim all these parts of it. And I can choose into a role, right? But I think that especially what I've seen with men is working towards that frees them. Mm-hmm. Right? It frees you to be any of those roles in any of the places you go.
instead of thinking I've got to be this box when I'm in ayahuasca, I have to be the guitar playing peaceful warrior that, is really inward looking and gentle. But then with my son, I need to be this. And then at work, there's no way any of that's coming out. It's like, but why? Because what would it be like, to have you in a community experience showing up in any of that authenticity? I just think it's a fun experience.
Integration. It gives a different meaning to the term integration.
Embodiment, integrate. I just think life is such a brilliant experiment. And I get that that's not an attitude you can come about lightly, because it's heavy and it's a lot for a lot of people. But like, what if, it was just a game? What if it is a great experiment? I was just talking to someone the other day who has, these things going on in her business and her personal life. And something came up and I sent her a funny meme and kind of giggled about it. And she's like, you can laugh about that? I'm going to cry. And I was like, but why? But what if, you're doing the work and you're setting it down and you're like, what if I tried showing up like this? What if I just tried it and there was no wrong way? And like you said, that's a big sell. But from the men I've worked with, getting to those places of saying, you don't have to throw everything in the trash, you don't have to burn it all down, you can cycle through. Right now I need a safe place, I need your workshop to create this. But also I hope one day to be able to show back up in my job like this as the grand experiment, and to be so safe within myself that if that caused conflict or caused me to lose my job, or maybe caused me to get promoted because I am actually embodying that leadership that nobody else knows how to embody. And when I've seen it, I just want to, from the woman's perspective, I know a lot of that fear is real when you're dealing with men in the workforce or women. But offering, a woman's perspective when I'm embodied and channeled and have all of my counsel, facing in the correct way. When a man shows that authenticity, whatever role he's wanting to play or projecting, if it's authentic, that vibration of authenticity in the moment, I will follow that anywhere. I will trust that.
Yeah, it's funny because men usually come to me because, and hopefully this will change at some point, but they come to me because they're having some issue with sex, or they want to learn how to have more control of their body, or they want to learn how to get a girl. And they're struggling with dating, or they're struggling.
It's
with
like the movie Hitch. You're that guy.
And it's like playing a role, doing all the things that somebody else tells you to do. Maybe you have some effectiveness in the short term, but what women want is a person. And so I work with them to help them come back to their own authentic self. Like, why are people attracted to my energy? Because I'm authentic. And maybe this is just my own sort of personal bias. I'm a really complicated person. I'm not simple in any way. I used to joke that Leonard Skinner song, I want a simple kind of man. I'm like, I'm screwed. But I think people are generally more complicated than we give ourselves credit for. Like, we do try to oversimplify things sometimes, and maybe I try to overcomplicate them. But like, I feel like for me, work has been, there's a lot of different parts of me. There's parts of me that they do express differently in different environments. I love the idea of bringing the whole of me everywhere I go, but I'm not going to express the whole of me everywhere I go, right? Like the lover, the sexual lover, I'm not going to express that in a board meeting.
Yeah, because your council will have decided this is not the avatar to lead with.
But that avatar, if we don't have a space for all the different parts of us to express themselves periodically, then that's where it's like we get that angst from. It's like I feel the need to be this part of me growing, but the child who's afraid, who's been hurt, who's kind of, I call it my frightened raccoon version. It's like, get away. Yeah. That part of me, sometimes that part of me just needs to come out somewhere, and that's what I believe, and that's why I come back to, I believe in the idea of a safe space, safe being. Like how, right now I have this men's group, it's Tuesdays, from 5 to 7:30, it's 2.5 hours. And in that 2.5 hours, we are just being, we're not trying to be anybody. All the parts of, like, whatever part is relevant, whatever's real for me in that moment, whatever's coming up in that moment, whatever part of me needs to get out, whether that's some weeks I'm just having the most amazing week and I just want to share that love, and not some weeks I'm just like a mess inside and I share that there. Having a space where all parts of me are welcome allows me to recenter, allows me to relieve pressure, or allows me to I come out of it like more centered, and now I can go out in the world and be the warrior better, right? And that's why I kind of push back a little on this idea of safe spaces, and the same thing with intimacy, right? Like in Tantra, which is a thing I've gotten much more and more involved in. I did this amazing retreat a couple weeks ago. It really is like this question, like, what's real for you? What is real for me? Because in intimacy in the bedroom, we are all of us programmed to perform. And, you know, and maybe that's one way to define the difference between sex and intimacy, right? Like, I don't want it to be a performance. I don't want to be a part of a performance anymore. And I certainly don't want my partner as a performer. Like, I've experienced that, and it can be good. And I've experienced intimacy where we are both just really being real with what's in the moment, and that could get messy. That can involve randomly taking a break because something comes up and one of us has got to cry.
Yeah.
But then the result that like what comes along with that is like I'm making love without the armor on, without having to be anybody, and I'm doing that with a person who I can feel authentically their authentic desire to be in that place with me. And when you've experienced that, and I think this is something like, oh man, like you maybe not experienced that. You've experienced, I'm gonna say Taco Bell, but I love Taco Bell. You've experienced McDonald's. Yeah. And you think McDonald's is great. But, you know, this is like a 5-star restaurant. Like, there's just so much more open to us of the experience of intimacy that once we start to experience that, like the appeal of cheap pleasure diminishes, you know. Porn is a great example. Like, it's a big thing here, and you know, I'm not afraid of it. It's like porn. No man really at his heart's like, I love porn. I mean, they maybe feel like this draw to it, but they're like, they're not walking away from watching porn and masturbating and thinking, I feel satisfaction, you know. But it's like, they don't know what else to do. Give them something else to shift that energy to. Give them the belief in that they can experience, to help them try out different forms of sexual stimulation, you know, other than pornography. And when they start to experience like joy from it, like this, like I watched porn when I was younger, and I can't really tell you when I stopped. I just lost interest in it in my 20s, and I just look back and I realized, oh, I don't watch porn anymore. And I would tell my guy friends that. Yeah. And you know what they would say? What? You don't masturbate? Because so many men, they don't even, because it's synonymous.
That's
word.
The same thing, yeah.
I'm like, I masturbate. I have my imagination, you know? Yeah. So these are, you know, but these are areas where, anyway, just to bring it back to what you said, the one thing I want to add to what you said is, yes, true safety has to be. Someone can create safety for me, but it's up to me to feel it, to let myself feel it. And I would say that's maybe one gentle feedback I would give women, you know, like women are like right now there's this sort of thing, and I've experienced this both with the media and both in personal relationships, where it's like a woman's like, I don't feel safe, you're doing something wrong. It's like, no, it's like a responsibility of each of us to create safety for our partner, but we have to take some ownership of that, right? But I just reject this idea that, yes, we have to do it for ourselves, but I think what we also really need to do is normalize that we need community. I need a group of men. I need a big men's container. I need periodic retreats. I need my close best friend that I talk to every day. I need my intimate partner. I need we need each other. We are not built to be by ourselves all the time. Even though we have to do this work for ourselves, like we are, to be whole, we really need to create, and that's a thing that we've sort of lost with the advent of the internet, you know, for a while, like the community, we just don't have community like we did. And so that's where I think the men's groups are really important. Like you need a space to go periodically to just get it out, be yourself, recenter, and then that makes you go into the world as a better man.
I love that. So to be clear, the, advice for women, or like just the, observation, is for the woman to find safety within herself as well and have equal accountability from each partners to feel safe, because one thing that can add fuel to the fire is for a woman to push all her safety on the man and say, you make me feel safe, and point outward to, or you're not making me feel safe, because that can exacerbate the situation of, not knowing what to do, and also ultimately put the man in a position where he is trying to be responsible for something he ultimately can't be responsible for, no matter what he does. If she can't receive that or find that self-trust and safety within herself, you're just gonna be bashing your head against the wall, right? And then you'll fall into self-abandonment and all of that. So it sounds like you're saying your advice is for women to find safety within themselves, right? Self-regulation. And then also for men to admit and women to be okay with and support the fact that men need these cycles of safe containers. And the definition of safe container from you is that any part of you at any given time is welcome there. And that's the container we've set. Whatever's alive in you today, whatever's showing up for you today, you're allowed to show it so that you can recenter and be in community and, be witnessed and heard, which relieves the shame.
Yeah, and we're conditioned to, it's the weirdest thing, because at the same time, like, there's a lot of men who have never actually had a real conversation with anybody but their intimate partner. And that's a common complaint women have. They're tired of being their husband's therapist. Yeah. But also, we feel like a lot of the pressure, this is something that, there was this great TED Talk about it, and I can't remember who it was, where it's like the pressure to be that on that white horse comes from women too. And so sometimes being in a community of men, we come in and we size each other up. That's what we do. Yeah. And then when we break through that, we realize, like, I don't need to be anybody here. I don't want to. There's parts of me that, like, I don't want to necessarily have my intimate partner see, because that's just the nature of it. Like, I just need it. Like, we just need it all. Like, we need our time. Like, and girls and women need that too, right? You need your girls'
Absolutely.
Time. We need this time.
But for some reason, we're better at it, and it's more acceptable.
Well, I mean, men have like, well, I'll go fishing.
Yeah, by myself.
By myself, or with the guys, or go on these trips, or, men have, or go down to the bar. I mean, throughout history, this has changed, but men have created these, sometimes gone to really extravagant lengths to do things, when really they're just like, I just want to go hang out with other guys and just talk about nothing, because we need that too, right? And I think I think everything you said is true, and I think it's true for both men and women, right? Like, we all got to learn to be a little more accountable. Like, I'm accountable for how I show up. I'm accountable for what I say. I'm accountable for expressing my needs, and I'm accountable for expressing my boundaries. And I think all of us could do better at learning how to articulate our boundaries, right? If you tell your partner, like, these are my boundaries, these are the things that I need, these are the things that, like, I don't like when you do, and when you do, it makes me feel this way, then it gives us a framework, right? Because men are kind of confused. Like, a lot of times being in a relationship with a woman, and I'm sure we're probably not any different, but all my experiences being in a relationship with women, it's like being in a room with a blindfold on, and there's like Legos everywhere, and there's some spikes on the walls, and you just never know when you run into something until you run into it, right? And so if we can, and oftentimes it's like, we don't know what we're supposed to do or what we're doing wrong. We know when we did something wrong, and I think that's
conscious communication.
It's so important, and but I feel like it's important to acknowledge that goes both ways. Like, we're not the best at it. We think we are, but we're we all just have so much. We got to get into, it's like this huge process. We got to get in touch with ourselves. Then we got to learn to communicate ourselves. And then we got to learn to listen and hear our partner's needs and meet them. And it's like, okay, so we're just taking baby steps.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a really important point, is we have a lifetime. You're not going to figure anything out in a 4-week course or 2 men's groups or whatever it is. So just give yourself some grace. And I think the biggest point is I really resonate with like I would call it your expanded definition of intimacy and sex. And I'll go back to Esther Perel because that resonates with me too. And she says that too. She says, the way we talk about it in the language would categorize sex as just this thing. And either we take that definition, we expand it out, so the lines are a little blurred, where all of it is an experience of intimacy. And so I just feel like that bubble just kind of opens up, and when both parties, anybody, whatever is going on for you in your relationship, start experiencing more of any of the physical, mental, spiritual, emotional connection as part of that process, then it all becomes relevant, and then it becomes less performance driven and less end goal driven, right? Like just reward driven. And I think that's beautiful. And I feel that you're onto something really important. It's right on time. It's such a beautiful journey for you to share with us. And once again, hopeful and just nuanced and welcome. And I do feel that too, where it's like you are creating that space around your body, right? Obviously you have your boundaries and there's the cycles, and you use your intelligence to navigate that. And, I trust you in that. And to be taking that space with you everywhere you go, that I'm welcome here, you're welcome here, is just a light in the world. And it's just really beautiful, very beautiful conversation, and a lot of things to think about, a lot of information. Every piece you gave, there could be a lifetime of work, and we know because you've done it, right? I'm sure that this is hours upon hours, and like, it's no small feat either to talk about plant medicine, because I've been on that journey too, and it's, a couple days of an experience, and then lifetimes upon lifetimes of embodying and integrating and understanding. It's a fast way to move through the world, but it's also beautiful and dynamic. And I do kind of want to ask if there's any messages that you feel like coming through or on your heart to share or want to be of service in before we end.
Yeah, it's just something that came up in me during the last bit where you were sharing. Grace. Like grace, compassion. Mm-hmm. Accountability is key, and they're not opposed. We all women and men, if we can just focus on giving ourselves more grace, giving each other more grace, we're gonna find that growth and integration into a better life be better, because we're all so hard on ourselves. Every person I have ever met, so self-critical, and the people that I've known that were the most critical of others were the most critical of themselves, right? And so as we go through this and we try to learn boundaries, and then we screw up, and it's like if somebody's like, well, here's my boundary, you just cross it, and you're like, oh, I'm a terrible person, we are all so beautiful, and we're all so cruel to ourselves in our own head, and I think if we just take no other message from it as we're going through this journey of learning, it's like we were talking about before the podcast, right? You start a podcast and the first episodes are all crazy and wacky, and I'm been having that conversation with myself today about like fighting my perfectionism, but if we can kind of start to give ourselves that grace and that love, that same energy that we would give our 5-year-old as they learn something, it's going to just ease the painful transition from the world that we're coming from, both personally and collectively, into the world that we want to create.
That's beautiful. I know I need to hear that today. Thank you. Contact and offerings and containers that we can give them verbally right now if they want to get a hold of you or work with you, and then I'll check out the show notes.
Yeah, probably the easiest way to find me is on Instagram. I am kind of put aside my Instagram for a minute, but it's just an easy way to find me, and if you can't contact me anywhere else, and it's Charles Dubois 801. I also you can go to my website. It's a little bit out of date. There's some updates that I want to do there, so it doesn't contain everything right now that we're working on, but that's charlesdubois.net. And then the podcast I talked about, Safe to Love, that's in its very early infancy of recording, so there won't be any episodes released by the time people hear this, but we've putting a lot of we've kind of slowed it down. We're putting a lot of time and effort into it because we really feel big about this particular project. So if you want to go and find that on YouTube or Spotify or Apple and subscribe to that. And then one other thing that we didn't even talk about, but if anybody's interested in this, we're also putting together this erotic writing workshop for women to help them to just kind of a fun way to sort of permission women to get in touch with their deep eroticism and release shame about some of the sexual concepts we've talked about. And that one's going to be really fun. And it's me and two other women doing it. And also if you're interested in, if you're a man and you're interested in one-on-one work, men's groups, men's retreats, like there's a whole, like all of those right now are in the works. So please, feel free to reach out to me. And I'd love to be of help wherever I can.
Yeah, sounds like a great resource, and you can just keep people connected. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's exciting. Good luck on the podcast. I can't wait. I'll go follow it.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is a really beautiful space.
Thank you for listening. Connect with me on Instagram at Crystal Zinn Yoga. Subscribe on my website at crystalzinnyoga.com to receive tools and practices for your holistic journey and to be the first to know about offerings, workshops, trainings, and retreats. We live in powerful times that require courage, bravery, compassion, authenticity, community, and grounding. You're not alone. Check out my free content, classes, and meditations on YouTube under Crystal Zinn Yoga, and have a beautiful day. Sat Nam.